Welcome back to the Butterfly Season podcast. I'm so happy to have you guys here today. I have a very dear friend of mine, Kacia Ghetmiri, and she is the founder of the EmpowerHer live community. It's a podcast community, literally like hundreds and hundreds of women that are all behind this beautiful idea that your voice needs to be heard. She is a real estate investor and so knowledgeable in the Airbnb space, but most importantly, she's a great friend of mine, and I cannot wait to have her on with us today. Welcome to the Butterfly Season podcast. Can I just say really quickly that I knew I was kind of dabbling in the podcast idea because after I had a talk, I was a speaking engagement on Butterfly Season, which you kind of forced me to really dive into.
Yeah.
It was at EmpowerHer. I was literally in the back at the speaker station and text my girl that does all my branding. I'm like, send me an invoice right this second so that I can pay it, because if I don't pay you to create my podcast artwork, I'm never going to do it. So today I decided I'm doing a podcast. She's like, what's going on? Where are you? I'm like, long story. I'll tell you later. And this was all at EmpowerHer, all thanks to you.
Aisha, I love you and I love what you're doing. And I think it's really important, as a podcaster myself and having helped so many women in the podcasting space, it's really rare to have someone that's so open about the shitty cocoon part, right? Which it's beautiful in its own right.
Yeah.
But you're willing to talk about that in such a transparent way that it's so needed. And I'm honored to be here with you. And I'm so proud of you and always rooting for you and just excited to dive into all the things.
Thank you. I do have to say, I really appreciate that you're proud of me. And I also want to tell you thank you for pushing me to just have this conversation, because you guys that are listening, Kacia's community is insane. Crazy in the best way. They're literally ride or die. We went to, she had her first in-person event and it was 500 people, which is unheard of. And 1 year ago,
yeah,
or maybe 2 years ago, you said that you were going to do this and you're like, can you speak? And I, first of all, was in the my shittiest cocoon season of all time and had nothing, everything that I knew was no longer. And Kacia was like, I want you to speak. I'm like, what the fuck about? Look at me. I'm a mess. And you're like,
exactly why. I wanted you to do it. Because I think anyone listening into this, it's we often get inspired by the things oh, this person's doing this thing and look at them. And we can borrow belief of what's possible from somebody else's example. And that matters. But what I see in you and in anyone that's going through that season of just the figuring it out, and it's just such a freaking mess, and it feels so overwhelming and confusing. It's so many ugly cries on your bathroom floor where you're snotting mascara get together in your mouth and you're choking, all of that. That's actually really inspiring, because that is life, right? It's the contrast of those really awesome, carefully curated Instagrammable moments, which that's cool and everything.
Right.
But it's really underneath all of that is the real growth. And that's what I knew people would resonate with. And I knew I wasn't worried about it, that if you would figure it out. If you just are willing to get on stage and talk about that, people are going to be inspired by it. And they were.
Yeah, they totally were. I did. Thank you so much. So that's just a little backstory for anyone listening, that Kacia was literally the fire under my asshole. And so I appreciate you for that.
I love you.
But I don't want to talk about me today. I want to talk about you. So Kacia and I met in a mastermind, and I will never forget, we had to all go up and we do this intro, and it's my first year in it. Every year, honestly, we have to do these intros, and you go stand up, and I'm always the first one because my name starts with an A, and or my last, who even knows, I'm just up there first. And you said, yeah, a year ago or maybe 2 years ago, I slid into Chris Harder's DMs, which is the facilitator of the mastermind, and said, I'm going to be in your mastermind one day, and then just created a business, met the income requirement, and then showed up the next year. Please walk us through what that cocoon season was for you to be able to live in a butterfly season, which is the Elite Entrepreneur Mastermind.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I want to talk about the middle cocoon season of what you're referring to, because I've had a lot of cocoon seasons, as we all have had.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is I did not have a back against the wall situation where I was forced to grow a business. I was actually in a business. My previous business was in network marketing, and I was at the top of my game in that, in terms of lots of income. I was getting to speak on stages to like thousands of people. I was making impact. I felt like I knew what I was doing, but I felt like it was also unaligned. And that was extra confusing because on paper, it made so much freaking sense. And by other people's expectations or standards, like I was crushing it in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And the ultimate like fail is when you don't feel excited. To me, at least that's the ultimate fail. Is like if I'm not fulfilled and I feel like I'm just scratching the surface on my potential and I'm not really actually putting myself out in the way that I want to, it felt extremely conflicting. And what was hard is, we know like the importance of calling our shot and going for our dreams, but it's really difficult when you're in something that a lot of other people are clapping for you, or maybe you're making a lot of income, or you've been doing it for a really long time, because we know not to compare ourselves to other people. But something I struggled with more was the idea of jumping into something new and knowing that I was going to have to compare myself to a prior version of myself when the circumstances were different. Because when we're doing anything new, we're going to suck at the beginning. And it's hard to go from something that really is totally fine to knowing that you're going to be a beginner again, essentially. So
yeah. Well, really quickly, what was it that you felt like? What was it that told you this is unaligned? I'm making all of this money. Because typically when we think about people who are like manifesting, like wanting to create a new reality and like feeling that way for abundance and money, blah, 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 blah. It's so interesting because it's so backwards, right? Like we think and feel that way because we want to get to here, but you're at here, right? Your bank account is reflectant of X, Y, and Z, your health probably, or whatever it is. Everything else is reflectant of maybe the person that you wanted to be. But now that you're there, you realize it was unaligned. What was it?
Yeah, it was aligned for a season. And when I knew that it wasn't anymore is when I felt like I knew what I was doing and it wasn't a growth opportunity. And I didn't get to have full expression of myself because there's still some parameters within that business model of things that I couldn't do or the way that I had to show up for a certain thing. And I just felt like there was more to me. Like, when you've just, you feel like you've got more in the tank and you're not really using it, you can shove down this uncomfortable feeling that's telling you that there's more for you, but you can only shove it down for so long because then that rumble turns into a roar. And for me, it would just like projectile vomit out of me and like ugly cries or like getting frustrated with my husband about stuff that didn't really make sense.
Right.
Because I just didn't feel like I got to really be myself. And I've lost 2 friends at age 30. And then, obviously, Sina, my husband, lost his dad about a year ago. And so I think the fragility of life is always on the forefront of my mind. And it's such a fuel source for me that like our days are numbered here and we don't know the count. So if I feel as if I'm holding back on my own potential or my like the expressed version of me, or I'm not as excited as I could be or making the type of impact in the way that I want to, then it's my responsibility to figure out how to get out of my own way and do it. And so because I didn't know what I wanted to do, I just knew that this wasn't aligned. I thought, what if I start a podcast and I start this podcast and bring people along on the journey? And I have a core belief that like, if something's not being represented the way that you think it should, it's because you're supposed to be the representation. Like the things that bug us are because we're supposed to do something about it. And I didn't feel like there was enough like women in the personal growth podcasting space.
There's a lot of men.
There's a lot of men. Only 20% of podcasters are women. So that's wild. But then on top of that, there wasn't enough women at that point in time that it felt like the positioning of the podcast was like we're girlfriends chatting and they're saying, come with me, let's figure it out together. There was a lot of women that I was inspired by who were like a few steps ahead of me. And they were like, yeah. Back when I was in your situation, when I felt like I had no idea what the F I was doing and I was ugly crying on my bathroom floor, this is what I did. And now I'm 5 years removed from that.
Right.
Like, that's cool and that's helpful. But I wish that I had a girlfriend that I could just talk about like how I had no idea what the fuck I was doing. So I just decided to create what I wish existed. And that catapulted very quickly because it was in so much alignment into a business that then essentially got me into that mastermind.
Yeah, which is that's how we got there.
That's how we got there.
Which is so beautiful though, because I was reading something and it was talking about like basically how the ego is that you think that what like cured you or helped you will help someone else. And that like hit me because like when people ask me for advice, I'm like, oh, do this, done. But like it's not like that for everyone.
Yeah.
So what I think is beautiful in your podcast or in like the come with me strategy is that like this is like my thought process around it, or even the feelings that came out of it, or the problems that I wanted to solve. And you kind of take what feels good for you or use that as a roadmap, but you kind of create your own, you know?
Yeah. Well, because I think sometimes there's this idea that, if we show up and do the thing that feels aligned for us, we then become living, breathing proof of what's possible for someone else. So someone can borrow a belief from you through your testimony of your actual life of like, if she can do it, I can too. Right. And that's a really powerful fuel source. But I also think there's a lot of beauty, and why I, love what you're doing here too, is like, there's a lot of beauty in saying, I'm stumbling, I'm confused, I don't know what's coming next, but here I am showing up in this very imperfect way that's super messy, but it's way more relatable than people that are trying to pretend like their shit's together all the time. Because I'm like, nobody has her shit together. I haven't had Oprah on my podcast yet, but I guarantee you when she eventually does come on, because I've been DMing her like crazy. When she does, she's going to say...
Can we put a screenshot of all of the DMs? Just message.
It's this video DMs. Oprah, it's me, Kacia again. Come back to me when you're ready.
Hey, girl, it's me. 3rd week in a row.
But truly, I just think it's important to show that part. And that's also what's really helped with like the whole imposter syndrome thing is I understand the idea of imposter syndrome, but I don't feel this imposter syndrome a lot, because imposter to me implies that you're faking it. Yeah. And I just don't fake it. So I'm not trying to pretend like it's hard enough to be a human. So I'm not trying to pretend like I know it all. Instead, I'm like, this is what I did. Here's how I stumbled. And then I yelled at my husband about this. And then we talked about the, whatever. It's just, it feels easier.
So have you always been that way, like a super transparent way? And if so, what is that like? Because I feel like there's 2 different, I don't know if it's schools of thought per se, but there's just like 2 different people. There's people who you might want to hear a lesson from them after they've resolved it and not while they're in the thick of it, because it's like you don't want to say something that you don't want to regret. Or maybe it's like, I don't even have an answer for you right now. Shit's just like sticky. Like, how do you navigate those things?
Yeah, I think that I've always been a very transparent person in general, but I also have paid a lot of attention to like, what am I attracted to? And I tend to be more attracted to like people in general that are just more open and raw. And I've always gotten more inspiration from people that just seem like they're very real rather than someone that's super polished, because I can't really connect with that. I'm just not a very polished person in general. And some people are like style icons and they're really polished all the time and that's their thing. And I love that for them, because somebody needs to see themselves in that example. But I'm just a little bit like scattered, and I definitely have ADHD, and I'm a little bit all over the place and all of that. But I think that me showing up as myself is a permission slip that somebody then can learn to give to themselves, to show up as themselves. So I've always seen it as this like, there's someone that I'm inspired by, and it's another woman who can take her hand and, like pull it back to me, be like, okay, come this way. And I do that for the next person. We're all kind of this source of inspiration for each other. But that doesn't happen if we don't show up as what actually feels right for us. And instead of wishing that we were like someone else, like I don't look at someone else who, we'll just use this example of polished, who is a super polished, put together person. I don't look at that and say, I want to be that. I'm like, I'm so glad she's being herself, because we need that example. I just don't feel as if that's my gift to the world, is to be that example. It's instead to be really open, really loving, really outgoing, a little bit messy, but also some people can see themselves in that, right?
Yeah. So in that transition from network marketing into EmpowerHer, at what point, what was your break free moment? Where did you feel like, okay, I'm out of this cocoon and I'm into my butterfly season?
So the first time that I recorded a podcast, I was so sweaty and awkward. I was like sweating under my kneecaps, and I was in my closet, and I was like, I used to do these really dramatic pauses because I felt like that would be more suspenseful. But what that does is everyone just
show me.
You're like, I'd be like, and then, like I would, like that's so awkward. And see, someone listening into this right now, they probably looked down at their phone and they were like,
oh, did it stop?
Did it stop? Right? Did it stop? No, it didn't stop. I just used to do that, right? But it's like you put your first rep in, and it was really exciting for me because the first time that I recorded a podcast, I was like, this might be something that could turn into something really awesome. I knew immediately, like, when you just get those like very visceral gut feelings, like this is the thing.
Yeah.
I had a couple of those, but I was trying to figure out how to piece them together. Like the first time that I spoke on a stage, I was like, there's something about this. I love watching someone's face click where you can just like, the feeling where you see their face click. Not because I want people to be like, oh, this girl's on a stage, but because I love that connection. And then I love seeing people afterwards and getting to hear their stories. So I took these things, like basically I've been doing this for a while where I pay attention to the things that give me more energy than they take from me. And then I think, how can I combine these all together and make this into a business? And then when I notice that something starts to take more energy, then I try to come up with a game plan of something to replace that. For example, I walked away from a lot of courses. I've walked away from memberships, things that I've done that have made a lot of income. But once I feel as if it's not the best use of my time, or it just takes a lot more than I feel like it lights me up, then I don't feel like it's my time to do that anymore. It's somebody else's time to go have that course and lead those people, right? So I just I let it flow. And so I felt like, I guess I would say the butterfly season came when I started to recognize I have a lot more control than I realized. Well, I can't control the external environment. I can always control my thoughts about it. And I actually can choose how to build a business based off of what I'm excited about. And that's actually possible. Not doing things just because I quote unquote should, but doing things that I'm like, this is freaking awesome. And I just want to help a ton of people do X, Y, Z, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's beautiful. My question for you is for somebody listening who's like, what is it that you would tell yourself or walk yourself through to trust yourself to say, this is making money, it works, I'm stopping it?
Yeah. So I think it all comes down to confidence at the root of everything. And entrepreneurship is the best opportunity to build confidence of anything out there. Entrepreneurship and fitness, because it's so easy. Like, I think of confidence like it's a bucket. So every single day that you show up and keep a promise to yourself, it's like you're putting a deposit into that bucket. Plop, 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 right? So when somebody doesn't understand your business, it's like they smacked the side of your bucket, and for sake of this analogy, some sloshes out, right? Or when you get like Sally Sue 293 on Instagram that's like, oh, your podcast is dumb or whatever. Okay, Sally, so you hit my bucket because I'm a human, not a robot. I care what people think. I just care what I think most. I'm trying to get to that confidence level, right?
Right.
So I think for the person that's like, this doesn't feel aligned, but it makes money, I challenge you to think like, what can I do on the side to just try it out to see if I could develop that into something? Because I'm actually not of the belief of jump and the net will appear and just like burn the boats. I haven't built anything that way. I built a network marketing business on the side of a full-time corporate job working at Google. That business then surpassed my Google income, and then I left. And then when that no longer felt aligned, I started to build a podcast on the side. I didn't make any money from the podcast. I didn't do ads on the podcast. I didn't have any other way for people to work for me or work with me. I did that for an entire year, 2 episodes a week consistently before I ever monetized the show, just with this idea of ad-free value. And eventually you'll be able to figure out how to build a business from this. So everything I've done, I've always done it on the side. So it sounds cool to be like, oh, I just quit this because it wasn't aligned anymore. But I'm always thinking of like, what can I try on the side that I can tell is going to get me excited enough that I just believe that if I'm in alignment and I back it up with action, it will actually end up making more income than the prior thing.
Yeah.
I just believe that to be true from like a core foundation of focusing on building confidence on a daily basis, like just keeping little promises.
Well,
you know?
I mean, it makes so much sense with respect to your analogy. If we think of every new opportunity as its own bucket, and you're just adding, if I'm doing a side hustle, it's my little bitty bucket. But every day that I pour into that side hustle, I'm getting the confidence to be like, okay, my main hustle is now my side hustle, and I'm just transitioning out into, making my side my main. I love that so much. Now, in that process, or even currently now, I, as I've been digging deeper into this whole like butterfly season idea, I've realized that like we can have several different cocoon seasons all happening at once, or you can be in a cocoon season and a butterfly season. And I think for me right now, I'm straddling both. I feel like on the surface, it looks very butterfly season, but like in terms of self-development, very much cocoon season. Mm-hmm. What are you experiencing right now? Are we dual butterflies? Are we dual cocoons? Like what are we doing here?
I feel like I am freshly, at the time that we're recording this episode, coming into a butterfly season in my marriage. That was the first year after, I mean, obviously you know the backstory and you know my husband, but For those listening in, we have been together for 14 years and we got married after 13. And the first year of our marriage was the biggest cocoon season of all 13. And that caught me off guard so much. And it was the most challenging. And it wasn't because we had lived together for 8 years. We've shared finances. We've moved all across the country. We've navigated a lot of stuff. But it was a major cocoon season. And it really caught me off guard, so much so that it impacted every other aspect that was probably a butterfly at that point, that all the butterflies came in and were like, we're all just going to cocoon together. So currently at this moment, I am so excited to say that I actually feel like I'm butterflying in every single aspect of my life. And I have not felt like this in so freaking long. So I can tap back into exactly how I felt when I was there, where I was so confused.
Yes.
And all over the place. And I wanted to be out of it. And now, just right here, just barely on the other side, I can look back and I'm like, I'm so freaking grateful that happened, because I have so much more compassion for myself. I have a much better relationship with my husband. I have a much better, clear vision of what I want to do in my business. And I feel like I trust myself to let go of things that don't feel aligned, even if I don't know the how. But when I was in it, I was in a cocoon season in my marriage while my business was in a massive butterfly season. Like in October, the event, huge, butterfly season for me personally and in my career. But in my marriage, I was still really confused.
What sparked that cocoon season in your marriage? How did you realize? What was it? What changed?
Yeah. So my husband, Sina, was a dentist, and then he decided he wanted to leave dentistry. And he is similar to the upbringing of you, of do the thing, hustle for that, get the title, do all of that, right? I mean, I know you know this, but for the listeners. And once he left dentistry, he was really excited to get into real estate. And I was really excited to have him as an entrepreneur and do something that felt aligned for him. 2 weeks after he made that decision, his dad's cancer came back and it was terminal. So he had weeks to live. He ended up passing after 12 weeks of being in hospice. And that rattled Sina so much that it then, part of the issue is a codependency issue, where it rattled me so much. And what's interesting is, for anyone listening in that's in a relationship with someone, you've got your norms and your dynamics in your relationship. And when something is very earth-shattering for one of you, even if there isn't a huge codependency issue, it still affects you energetically so much. And it rocked everything, because Sina was the stable, consistent person, and he had been like that our entire relationship. Go-getter, linear path. So he was becoming an entrepreneur and was dealing with grief. And then we were dealing with the fact that we were also together all the time at home, because we were both entrepreneurs, him for the first time. And then I have my idea of how I think a new business should go, how I think a new podcast should go, because I've done it before.
Right.
And while the intention was great, it was causing friction, and I was trying to overcompensate for the struggle season that he was in. And Aisha, the best thing that ever happened was I started to think about it this way. I read this book called Think Like a Monk from Jay Shetty's the author. He talks about this study that they did of, basically it's a dome that they created where they tried to grow trees, and they gave them perfect soil, perfect conditions, water, sunlight, everything. The trees grew super big and tall, and then they all fell over because they had no roots. They had no resistance from the external environment, so they weren't forced to build roots to actually support themselves.
Yeah.
And I looked at Sina and I was like, it was literally one of those aha click moments where
roots.
I was literally like, I'm robbing you of your root building season. So you don't, when you do accomplish that thing, you don't get to feel the pride and fulfillment of knowing that you earned it. And that is the reason why we set goals. It's not just to accomplish the thing. It's the feeling that we think that we're going to get from accomplishing that goal. And if I'm over here trying to fix this and coddle you, I'm preventing you from building roots. And I'm also preventing you from the joy and fulfillment that you deserve from working hard to earn that thing. And then I was like, I'm the problem. It's me.
So, okay, well, question for you then. What was it? What were the specific things that the codependence manifested itself? Did you feel like you had codependence in your marriage and everything was just great, so there was no issue, and then when things weren't great, then we were starting to see codependence manifest itself? Or was it triggered by the loss of Sina's father?
I think there was always codependency there, but I didn't recognize it because it didn't cause any issues, because it worked really well for us and it was just this dynamic for so long. But when he was struggling so much of not knowing, there's an identity piece that comes when you're leaving a career like that you went to school for so long for. So there was this identity shift, him not knowing who he was because he had tied his worth to his identity too much. And we didn't realize that until after he left. Being a brand new entrepreneur and not knowing what the hell to do and being motivated very differently than me. We have very different working styles and we just never really noticed it because we weren't working with each other.
Yeah.
And then dealing with loss, which then had grief and anxiety that came from that and a lot of family stuff that came up for him. So I just wanted to help. And the intention was, oh, I'm really good at getting myself pumped and thousands of women that like listening to my show and all this stuff pumped. Let me just apply that same typed up cheerleader to you. And it was really, really bad. And it was causing, he was just like, Kacia, like, stop talking to me like I'm a freaking like podcast. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. Just let me figure it out. And I was like, oh.
I don't mean to laugh, but I could just picture you like with the purest heart just trying so hard.
Oh, yeah. The intention was great. But then once I just started to realize, I'm like, I don't want to be married to someone that like I feel like I'm having to step into this role of like, I can take care of everything. That's not what we want in our marriage.
Yeah.
And so it was really like, now looking back, it's just like comical because I'm literally like, how did I think that was going to work?
Yeah.
But it's, sometimes when you're in a different season than the person that you're doing life with.
Right. You don't know what you don't know. You literally don't. And what I love too, when you were telling me the roots analogy, I wasn't even thinking Justina alone. I was thinking from a marriage perspective, like this is also roots.
Yeah, for sure.
And if your
goal, and if your goal with marriage is like you're going to constantly grow together rather than accidentally growing apart, as so many people do, then you've got to figure out how to navigate all of these seasons. And I'm just so committed to doing that. But I can only control myself. And I know that cognitively, but when the season felt difficult and when he was in the necessary cocoon, I can still be in a butterfly season when my significant other is in a cocoon. And I didn't actually believe that was possible. And now we happen to both be in a butterfly season. I'm like, let's freaking go. This is awesome. But now I know better for when that happens again, where one of us struggles.
So how did you guys realize, and I'm asking so many questions on codependency just because like you said, this is kind of like a come with me too. And I'm just figuring out so much about like literally it's like earth shattering codependency. And I have never I'm like, no one ever talks about this. Like, why? How am I just stumbling upon it for the first time in my own life? How did you guys deal with that? When did you guys both realize, hey, this is a codependent thing? And then what did you guys do to create a more healthy relationship between the two of you?
I realized it when I was with you and Lizzie and Tracy at lunch.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So to give context to this for anyone listening in, I think it's really powerful when you can let yourself be open to feedback from someone that you trust, that their intention is pure, even if it's not what you want to hear. Yeah. And it was a mutual friend of ours, Lizzie, who said, Kacia, I see a pattern in you that I see in myself that it's represented in a different way. So for me, I grew up with someone who struggled with addiction issues. And I've always been this like very happy-go-lucky, excited person who's had a lot of friends around them. But part of the reason that I feel as if I've been so excited is it's a very natural personality trait, but it's also a coping mechanism. And your strengths can also be your weaknesses. It's like a double-edged sword, right? And we know that. But I recognize that like underneath this excitement is a level of anxiety it's not shown as anxiety. Because when I think of someone that's anxious, I think of them asking questions a lot or being fidgety or
maybe even
more
a recluse.
soft-spoken.
Yeah, like
recluse. I'm not. I mean, I'm a
loudest
massive
person
extrovert.
in the room, yes. The biggest energy, brightest light, like,
and it's
miss you.
Real. And it's real that I'm like that, but there is this need underneath it, if I peel it back, that I'm just more comfortable when I can get other people excited around me. And it's a form of control that I never identified as control until Lizzie mentioned it to me. And then I started going down a rabbit hole because this is also part of my personality is I get excited, but then when I recognize something, I want to just do research out the wazoo about it. And then I want to fix the problem immediately because I don't like to be in negative emotions for very long. So I think it's really interesting because when anyone listening into this too, it's like when you look back on your childhood, there's often ways that you coped that worked for you then that no longer serve you now. And for me, even just my level of enthusiasm and this, because of a necessity, I got a lot of self-sufficiency and I was like, I can handle it. I can do it on my own. I can always count on myself. I was gritty and resilient because I had to be. But it didn't show up as this like tough girl personality. It showed up as this excited, outgoing, I'm going to get invited to all the things because my personality is going to open a door for me. Like it was actually a coping mechanism.
Yeah.
And now later on at 33 years old, I'm recognizing I need to, like, I had to learn how to ask for help. I had to learn how to not control people around me. I mean, I notice it, like, because once you are aware of it, I think that's the first step.
It.
You can't unsee it. And you notice it in everything.
Yes.
I was on a Zoom call because I was going to be speaking at a real estate event. And there was one guy on the call that his energy was so low vibe. I could physically feel it because I'm paying attention to the sensations in my body too.
Yeah.
I physically felt uncomfortable with how negative he was, that I caught myself wanting to like tell a joke and try and get him excited because I was uncomfortable with him because he was like, his energy, I could feel it.
You know what is so crazy? As you say that, I'm realizing, because I too, very codependent person, and I'm realizing some of the things too, and I'm just now uncovering the coping mechanism that I do. But I know that if I'm in a room and I feel like somebody feels uncomfortable or someone feels like maybe they, not even uncomfortable, but maybe uncomfortable, if they want to be there or don't want to be there, I will go out of my way to make them feel like I'm affirming them in whatever it is that they're doing, even in a conversation, and pretending like, this sounds so bad, but literally pretending like whatever that they're talking about, they're so smart. I had no idea any of the things, to make them feel more better about being in that situation. It's so strange to me, but it results from control. But really, I'm just like, I can't stand being in this room knowing that you don't want to be here.
Yeah. And like, I bet you anyone listening into this, you can find something that you do, and it's probably the biggest gift that you have has a complete opposite side to it. So you don't want to take it away. You just want to learn how to manage it. Like, my favorite thing about me is that I have so much energy and enthusiasm and optimism for life. And I feel like I can help other people get out of their own way and get more excited. But not to the degree that it's my responsibility to do that.
Yes,
right?
And that's the turning point.
That's the turning point. It's like finding what's the edge there where you double down on your strengths, because I truly do believe that all of us, if we can understand like the way that we are is a gift that we were given. Like, our personality is a gift that we're given. And then figuring out how to get out of our own damn way and put our message or our story or whatever, our gifts out into the world is our responsibility to give back to the world. That being said, knowing what is the edge where your positive trait starts to become something that can negatively impact you and other people around you, where's that spot, and catch yourself and then figure out what do you need to put in place to make sure you don't go that direction, right?
So you were talking about the physical sensations. In that instance, I totally cut you off because you just closed the loop for me in my own mind. So sorry about that.
No,
but what was it in that situation that you did to stop yourself, or like where did you take it to the edge before it became your responsibility? And then also, how does that show up in your marriage?
So on for example, the Zoom call, like I could just feel it, and I was like, I play with it more in my head, where I have this very like childlike wonder, and like I think there's like if there was an inner child in me, she just wants to be doing cartwheels. Like, she's just happy, she wants to play. And honestly, part of it is because I think she was robbed of a little bit of that growing up in the environment that I grew up. So I feel like I have that in me. So instead of harshly judging myself when I feel it, it's a very visceral feeling where like I want to tell, for example, my husband Sina, I want to say like, oh, you should do it this way. I feel it, and I'm like, you don't need to say that because it's not your job to say it. Get curious about why it is that you're thinking that you need to say that. So then I start to kind of play with in my mind, like it's a fun thought that's like bopping around, like it's hopping from cloud to cloud. And I know that sounds really like weird and kind of wooey to say it that way, but I've never found that I feel good if I'm being very critical of myself. Just like even with like health and fitness goals. Right now, I'm working on a lot of health and fitness goals, but I'm not going to criticize myself into creating a body that I'm more excited about. I'm going to feel grateful in pursuit of that because it just feels better. And again, it goes back to even the fragility concept of like, if our days are numbered here and we don't know the count, I'm not going to waste my life by criticizing myself into wanting to be better because I'm always going to want to be better. Right. So, and it comes up in my marriage and little things. It's actually not even big things where like, for example, Sina started a real estate podcast. And as much as I want to like, I want to be like, oh, you could go this direction with this person and you could ask them about this. And I'm like, Kacia, not your job. So instead I sit back and I'm like, love it. Great direction. And I'm not bullshitting. Like I actually mean that, but I'm like, I'm so excited to see how he evolves through this when I just get out of the way.
Yeah.
And now I'm starting to see like, this is a beautiful gift that sometimes there's a need for someone to step in, myself included, or there's a need for you to step back and realize like that person's evolution doesn't need your input right now.
Yeah.
That's tough, but it's beautiful to watch. And now I'm just like watching my husband just like butterfly, like a real like floppy wings, you know?
So does he ever feel like, because you guys have been together for 14 years.
Yeah.
There has to be, codependence was there.
Yeah.
So does he notice when you don't chime in the way that you used to? And does he think, is this not authentically you? Like, does he ask, like, because my husband will say, I know you want to say something and you're not saying it. And I'm like, what? I don't want to say anything.
So he knows, because we've talked a lot about this, where the way that we handle it is like, so I'll actually use another example, because in case someone can resonate with this more. I am a big visionary, and I'm married to someone who is an integrator. So I have really big dreams, and as soon as Sina comes in with the how question, it's like popping like a bubble of excitement for me. I want to know the how. Like I actually do want his input, but not in the ideation phase. So for anyone that like, if you are the dreamer that's listening to this podcast, or maybe you are friends with the dreamer, your sister's a dreamer, or your significant other is, for someone that likes to talk and like think really big and get excited, if you come in with a how, it literally does feel like you're crushing their soul.
Yeah.
So I know that he wants to ask that question when I'm in the ideation phase. And he goes, he'll say out loud, like, this is when I would want to ask the how, but honestly, I'm just really excited for you. And I'm just stepping back for a second. And I don't ask him the how because I don't want to know it then.
Yeah.
So it's almost like an over communication where sometimes I catch myself where I bite my tongue. He's talking about his podcast, for example. And I'm like, I'm not going to say what I think because I genuinely want to know what you think. And this is your podcast. And I just want to be excited for you. So I have to say it out loud. Just like Cam to you would be like, I know you want to say something. You're like, yeah, no, I would say something. But I'm trying to practice like giving you the space to think, because I know how much of a gift that is to you. And I want to be supportive and I want to be in your corner.
Right.
I don't want to force you through it. And I don't want you to do it the way that I do it because I don't want to be married to myself.
And I don't want to rob you of your roots. Yeah.
Yeah. I want you to build your roots. And also it would just be the things that make us different are the reasons why it works so well. Right. It's like this yin yang type of thing. Like, I don't want to be married to someone that's constantly going off into this like cyberspace with their ideas. Like, someone's got to come in and be the how. Otherwise, like, where the hell? Like, I want to be all over the place. Who knows what I'm doing? Right.
Yeah. That is so beautiful, honestly, especially in relation to marriage. Like, a lot of people will ask me, Cam and I have been married for 6 years. We've been together for maybe 12-ish or so. And people will say like, oh, like first year of marriage, like people always say it's hard. And I'm just like, everyone has their own level of hard. And I honestly, truly in my heart of hearts believe is whatever it is, it's the small thing. It's a big small thing, meaning like in all of the years of dating, it wasn't a big deal, but it was just there. That is going to be the biggest thing in your first year. Whatever that is, that small thing will be like the hugest thing. But what's so nice is I am so confident, like our first 2.5 years of marriage was really hard for us. And it wasn't codependency in that moment, but it was like building a family and like our own nuclear family and what that looked like and roles and like other outside like noise and how do we navigate that and like support one another. that is paid dividends on the back end when we're dealing with like crazy shit that could like crumble a marriage, right? Like outside factors. And I'm like, dude, like if it wasn't for those like hard ass root building years, like God knows like what, you know, the real hard stuff would have been.
It's crazy because when you think about that, even as an individual, so for someone listening into this that isn't married, it's like you, like when those things came up in your life, like anyone can think about their past where it's like something happened and you were like, I have no idea how the hell I'm going to navigate this. I have no tools in my toolbox. I have no coping mechanisms. I don't have an external environment that's supportive and conducive to my growth. The thoughts that I'm thinking are not serving me. And you're in this like, holy crap, how am I going to figure this out? And now, if you're listening into this show, here you are on the other side of it. Or if you're not, you can have this deep belief that like, you know that you've been through hard things before, so you can navigate this thing that you're in right now. And then trusting that there's going to be a future version of you that will look back on you now and say like, thank you so much for how you showed up for me, and be better because of what you went through.
Right.
And in your marriage, in your relationships, in your business, in your career, in your personal growth, in your health goals, it's like, if you can actually get on board with this idea that it is actually working for you, even when it doesn't feel like it, it's like tap into that version 6 months ahead of you or 1 year ahead of you and be like, what gifts am I giving her? Well, I'm giving her so much resilience. I'm giving her so much more depth of connection in her marriage. Like I know Sina so much more in the last year than I did in the first 13. And we've lived together for years because of how hard that was. And I also, to be honest with you, I think of marriage very differently than I did when we got married.
How so?
Because so when we got married, I wanted to be married to him. I knew that I wanted to be married to him. And I was so excited about this after so long together. But it was 6 months later, so we just went to Thailand for a late honeymoon. And when we were there, I was like, I feel like I get it now. Because what happened is like, we got married, and 2 weeks after we got married, we moved to Denver where we live now. And then we started getting into real estate investing, and like everything just started like really snowballing. So we were just going through the motions so fast. And I think that was his tendency to not deal with some of the shit storm, was to just get really busy so he could just ignore it for a second. And I was on board for that because I was like, at least he's doing something and he's getting excited.
And he's in a good mood, yeah.
Right, exactly. I'm like, let's just do that. But then when we slowed down and created space for 2 weeks to unplug and not work and have nothing really exciting outside of just us being together, I was like, I get it. Like, I fundamentally get this, where I'm just like, I am so committed to my own individual growth always being my responsibility, and then being the biggest cheerleader that I can for you. But your growth journey is going to be different. We just get to do this together. And it's like, of course, I cognitively understood what marriage was, but sometimes you don't give yourself enough space to stop and think like, what did I just do? And we ended up getting we're calling them our marriage tats. We got tattoos in Thailand, and it's on my wrist, and it's just the symbol, and it means like through ups and downs together we move forward. And I was like, this is so permanent. A tattoo feels really permanent. And I was like, I'm just in this. And so every time I look at it, it's like this symbol that for whatever reason, my wedding ring didn't give me this symbol, but this tattoo on my wrist that's like, through the ups and downs together we move forward. I'm committed to that something just clicked. And I don't think a lot of people talk about that, because it sounds like you're just going to get married and like, now we're going to be married for forever. And he was of that mindset where it's like, we're married, we're in this for forever. But I don't think I honestly really committed until 6 months after, just recently.
Yeah. And I get that so much. I remember our first year of therapy, we were just like our first year of marriage, we were in therapy. We were not seeing eye to eye. And I was just like, I'm a projector. And so like how my mind works is I see like bird's eye view, meaning if this equals this, then that equals that, and that equals that. Like all of those facts didn't have to have happened in this scenario, but I can tell you that based off this pattern, this is where it will go. And I'm just like, if we are not seeing eye to eye, I don't know what this looks like. And he was just like, so I remember leaving therapy and him like wanting to hold my hand and being like, we'll figure it out. I was just like, how the fuck? Like, first of all, I don't want to hold your hand. Like, how are you? Just like, like, it'll all work out. And I'm just like, I actually don't see it. But really, like, to your point is like, it's like through the ups and downs, like we're committed to all of this. And
Yeah.
I think that like now with my hindsight eyes, like over time, it's gradually clicked. And I'm just like, yeah, like literally like he was doing what you were saying, tapping into the future version of himself and knowing that like, yeah, even though I don't see a path right here, right now, I do know that like these are those small deposits to show me that like if I continue putting the work in my marriage, it will pay me dividends on the back end. And it's just making the decision to say it's going to work out and just allowing it to present itself in whatever way it does.
Yeah. It's really that toggle that I do constantly where it's like, what gifts are you giving a future version of you 1 year from now? Like I like to do like a 1 year toggle. So it's basically, how am I showing up now that's contributing to where I want to be in a year? And that's also how I make a lot of decisions, is what I'm doing now getting me closer to where I want to be in a year or further from it? Because if you ask me a 5-year plan, I'm a big visionary, but I don't like the time frame. Like I don't want to constrict myself. But then simultaneously while doing that, so I don't get caught up in just wanting to get there, wherever there is, I then have this toggle that's 1 year ago, where I think about this exact date 1 year ago. What was I doing? How did I feel? What was my relationship with myself like? What was my relationship with my girlfriends, my family, my husband, my health, my all of this? And I'm like, wow, like, look how far you've come. So it's like this dance of being so grateful and proud and letting yourself feel that feeling like on a very real deep level while being simultaneously excited about the version of you that you're going to be in 1 year. So it's like, then I get to be present where my feet are because I toggle, and then I'm like, all right, what's the focus for today? Yeah. And that feeling is so great, you know?
Yeah, it's so beautiful. You've always said that. And I think that when I heard it most beautifully is when our friend Lizzie, who for the listeners is the person that kind of revealed to Kacia codependency, also revealed to me codependency. And one of the first episodes on the podcast is with her and she talks about it in more detail. But I remember you had told her, like, I just want to be where my feet are. And I even remember after you saying that, she was like, I have no idea what that even means. Like, literally no idea. And then 2 years later, she's like, I get it now. It clicks. It's like you're not in the future thinking about what if and everything that comes with that. And you're not in the past like, oh my God, I can't believe. Like, I wish I would have changed. What if I did? It's just like you are just here right now, knowing that the past is done, but the future will take care of itself.
Yes.
And I'm here.
Exactly. And some people that have a lot of anxiety, it's like, or you get really caught up in like, how am I going to get there? It's like, okay, think about the future for a second, play it out to the absolute worst case scenario. And then once you play it out really to the worst case scenario, like if this really goes wrong, like say you're launching something, if this really goes wrong, what is the absolute worst case scenario that could happen? Because when you play it all out and you recognize, I could probably handle that. Okay, there you've gone to the future. Now let's play it out to the best case scenario. How good could it get? Because I honestly think it's going to get better than you can even imagine. There's that. And then you can then tap back in to like take care of it so you can play it out. And then you can tap back into like, okay, now what do I need to do today to focus on this bucket of growing my confidence? Because that's the root of everything. Because I'll believe in my ability to figure things out. I'll believe that I'm worthy and capable of my vision or creating this body that I want or this marriage that I want or this business or whatever, like having however much money I want to have in my bank account. I believe that I'm worthy if I am confident enough to believe that anyhow that comes up along the way, I will figure it out. To your point, the future will figure it out. But sometimes some of us do have to go to that anxiety spiral downwards black hole, prove to yourself that you can handle even the worst thing, and then you can tap back into it.
Yeah.
But like staying in the present is like, I think it's why like I feel genuinely really, really happy even when there's like I want the human experience of the contrast, but I genuinely feel very optimistic and excited a majority of the time because I'm just not worried about my past mistakes or worrying about a future version of me's problems.
What was it that got you to the point where you realized, I would say it's like a core value of yours. Like I've heard you say it several times in beautiful circumstances, like not just like this is just your one-liner that you always say.
Yeah.
What was it that led you to that point to say like, this is number one priority, be where my feet are?
I think one of the biggest gifts that you can give to anyone else in the world is your presence. And like, you can tell if somebody is like in a conversation. Like I have no idea what is going on around me right now because this is what I'm focused on. Like I don't have my phone, I don't have notifications, I don't have anything on my computer. I'm just like in this conversation because that's one of the gift of presence. I just know how good it feels for me. Quality time and then physical touch are my two love languages, which is why I like love in person. But I just think it's like, because of the fact that it's always on my heart to try and do that, I think that's part of the gift that I'm supposed to give to the world and anyone that I can be around. Because sometimes the things that are really important to us, like some people, like justice is a really important, or like integrity is super important to them, or being a creative example is really important to them. I'm like, I just want to be present, excited, grateful, and like optimistic. And let me just give that to other people. Because I just don't believe that you're gifted that on your heart, this like vision or this desire, unless you're supposed to put that into the world. Yeah. So it's my responsibility. And I let that like pressure of necessity, that if this is my actual personality and core values, then it's my job to be an example of that in the world. Otherwise, why in the hell would I have been gifted this?
Yeah, I love that so much. I do virtual devotionals each month, and we did one on purpose. And it was talking about like, you need to get quiet to figure out your purpose. And when you get quiet, like just like you were saying with respect to marriage, like what a beautiful revelation when you got quiet. You know? You get quiet, you get clear on a vision, and then the motivation, this really struck me, but also it hit me because I've struggled with this. It was like motivation fades, but discipline is what actually creates the lasting change. And so if you don't have that attitude change around who you want to be and your goals and your marriage and your business and your life, that the process is really where it's beautiful. You will never, once the motivation is gone, you're not going to show up the way you wanted to show up. The results will not be that way. And what I love about you is that, yes, you are 10 out of 10 motivation, but also you talk about like these small deposits daily, and that's the discipline.
Well, and I love that you brought up the identity piece of it, because it's like, if I want to be someone, like if I think about the end of my life and how I want to be remembered, it's not going to be you had X amount of downloads on your podcast or X amount of dollars in your bank account or whatever. It's going to be like, she made me feel like I was the most important person in the room when I was in any room with her. Like that matters to me on a deep level. And then she inspired me through how she showed up as herself to be myself. If I just do that part, and maybe I help some people fall in love with the process more than what the process can produce, then I feel like I've like lived out my legacy. And it's not a legacy of what I'm just building to pass down to our future kids. It's a legacy in this moment, in this day, and is a very like grounded focus on that. But it's to your point, asking like, what's the identity? Like how do I want to be remembered? Okay, well, how does someone who wants to be remembered that way need to show up when they get on a Zoom call or when they enter the room? How are they going to raise their vibration to be energized and excited and present? Like, what do they need to get off of their plate? Well, they need to get good at asking for help. They need to get good at outsourcing. They need to get good at taking constructive feedback from people that can show them something that can help them become better. Right? They have to take care of their health. They have to drink their freaking water. Maybe they don't drink so many freaking margaritas and they do a dry January or something. I don't know, whatever, right? Where it's like, they have to, like, those are the things that person who has that identity has to do. And I'm also like, how does a person who has that identity think about herself, but also what questions does she ask herself?
Yeah.
So a basic example, if you want to be a runner and you go out for your first run, if you adopt the identity of being a runner, you're not going to be thinking, this run sucks. Why am I so slow? Like, I can barely breathe. I'm dying. It's like, okay, I'm proud of myself for making progress. Like, ooh, I'm a runner. How does a runner think? Where a runner is like, wow, look at the fact that I have the able body to move and look at the outdoors and all that stuff, right? So it is the identity piece of it too.
Yeah. This is just so beautiful. I'm grateful for our friendship, like beyond, seriously. And I'm grateful for, I tell you this all of the time, but literally like wiping the snot and tears out of my eyes, unprompted, unasked. Like, you saw me when I was like, I'm fine, I don't need help with anything. And on the surface, everyone would be like, yeah, she's fine, she looks great. And you were like, no, I could smell you from a mile away. So thank you for pouring into me and making me feel seen, heard, and just like all of the things. And thank you for being here on the podcast with me. Like, this has been, I had no idea. I knew what we were going to talk about, but I did not think it would be about codependency in marriage. And I love that. I love that for us.
I love you. And I'm so proud of you, not for what you're doing, but more so just like how you do it, right? With the transparency, because that is a core value of mine too. It's like, I want to be transparent. I want to be real and be open to how a conversation goes. And I just think podcasting is such a beautiful platform, and it's just perfect for you. And look at you and your wings, just flapping away, girl. I love you. I love you so much.
I love you too. So thank you so much for being on the Butterfly Season podcast. And you guys, in the show notes on Apple, Spotify, and then on YouTube, all of the deeds to find Kacia Heard podcasts will all be there. And if there's anything that you want people to show up for, find you at, and you do a lot of in person, you have an amazing Airbnb. If you want to just like plug yourself away, let's do that.
I love you. I think like the free stuff, like come check out EmpowerHer podcast on Instagram. I'm Kacia Ghetmiri. Yeah, we do retreats and events and all of that stuff. I love in person. My husband and I do Airbnb and real estate investing. But honestly, like, if this episode was helpful for you, because a lot of people don't recognize this, and maybe you obviously said this on your podcast, but like, take this episode on social media or send Aisha or I a DM if this was impactful, because we're having this conversation like we are girlfriends chatting, because we are, but we're picturing that you listening in is with us. And it's always really helpful to get feedback as a podcaster. And I feel as if sometimes we don't say this enough, like, tell us, not because we want to just like make us look cool on Instagram, but because we want to add value to you. So Aisha can know, like, was this conversation helpful? Great. We'll do more like that. So that would be great. I love you.
Love you, Kacia, so much.